A very quick introduction for Porochista Khakpour. If you read the email that was sent out with this, you know that she was born in Tehran and she was raised in LA. She received her BA from Sarah Lawrence, her MA from Johns Hopkins, and she's done a lot of writing. This is her first novel, and it's received scads of awards from all kinds of important magazines like New Yorker, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, what else? San Francisco Chronicle, et cetera, et cetera. Several awards for the book and lots of good critical praise. It's a really funny book. It's a really good book. Definitely recommend you take the read. Porochista is actually a very interesting character. She's going to do a reading for us, but I'm also going to ask her something. If she could tell us about her experience doing things like prank calling Iran for several hours. Perhaps you can open with that. So give you a little sense of who Porochista is and the kind of writing she likes to do. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce Porochista Khakpour.
Hi, can you guys hear me? It's kind of crane. Hi, thank you for coming. I actually have had many friends who've been Google employees over the years, but this is my first time inside a Google compound, so it's very exciting, and it's better than I imagined it would be even. I tried to snoop when I went to the bathroom and look at you guys in your cubicles, and you all seem very happy, which I think is cool and weird and a little harrowing for those of us who went the starving artist route to see people who love their 9-to-5 jobs. It's very disturbing. So thanks for that. But no, it's cool. Maybe you guys are the ones who hate your jobs, and that's why you're here at the reading. Who knows? Hopefully you do. No, it's very cool to be here, and I've seen the Authors at Google series on YouTube, and it's exciting, I think, for us. So wonderful. A little bit about my book, Sons and Other Flammable Objects. Yeah, it was my debut novel, and it came out in September, in case you missed my very glorious 15 minutes of literary fame. It has had a long hardcover run. It's about an Iranian father and his Iranian-American son, and primarily about a sort of cataclysmic fallout they have. And the whole novel is sort of an investigation of why they have that sort of disastrous falling out, and it sort of provides theories as to why, theories ranging from, ancient Persian history to 9/11 to I Dream of Jeannie. There's a big I Dream of Jeannie fascination in the novel for the protagonist, Xerxes Adam. And the dad's name is Darius Adam. That's really all you need to know. The mom's name is Lala. That's her Americanized name. And I'm going to read actually a sort of atypical section, or maybe two short atypical sections from the novel, only because I don't know. I just want to. I've read a lot of the same sections over and over, and I want to read something that's a little different. I say that they're atypical mostly because these two sections deal with romance in a way, and this novel is not much of a. It's not a very romantic book, but I thought it might be fun to read about Xerxes' first kiss, and then his first girlfriend gathering episode. So all you need to know is that he is an Iranian immigrant, and he is in California. And this first episode, I don't know if you guys have experienced this or know this reference, but a lot of times in American public schools, all the immigrants tend to sort of be clumped with the other freaks. Okay, at least that was my experience as an Iranian immigrant in Los Angeles. The kids who immediately liked us, immigrants were like the goths or the punk rock kids or the kids, how do you say this? Not retarded, but like the the kids who were like in the remedial classes or the bad kids always liked the immigrants. We were all in the same sort of ghetto together. And so Xerxes' first friend in America is this sort of this mall punk rock kid, Sam, and she sort of befriends him, and the friendship takes a different turn as they get older. So I'll read this, and then it's another small section. And this is the first time I've read this, so forgive me if I'm fumbling because, sorry. Okay. For a long time, his friend Sam was the closest thing to him that he had, the first human relationship he established a deep bond with. Don't even fucking say it. I know the shit you're thinking, she was known to say to him with a god-haughty grin. He who never knew what he was thinking had this girlfriend, not girlfriend, they'd both wearily remember. No fucking way, Hurl City she'd snap if anyone dared. This ungirlfriend of his very young adulthood, to understand him, to steer him, to set him right, to know for and beyond him. As Xerxes hit 13, Darius and Lala suddenly took on the appearance of fools in parent drag, phony, annoying, embarrassing, and suddenly Sam was his real family. She was all he had to grease the wheels of the ever-clunky initiation into teenagedom. With her steel-toed Doc Martens and black department store denim that had been legitimized with whiteout scrawlings of anarchy signs and profanities, Sam was the type who identified with anything the mainstream did not accept. And so Xerxes was it. Even when the goths, like the powdery, black-frocked ghosts of old, shy, weird kids, began to proliferate, Sam dismissed their dress-up and cult-like clusterings. She maintained Xerxes was better. X doesn't belong to shit, get it? X, I got you. You want me to fuck them up or something? High school. They began tempering old movies and I Dream of Jeannie with Sam's death metal and gangster rap. Hours and hours went by after school when Xerxes' parents thought he was at band or choir or some music thing, practice. Does he even play anything, Darius would wonder? He better not be putting his mouth on other kids' instruments, Darius would wonder further once in a while. When really X was just lying on the lawn with that strange, wonderful adolescent blessing curse, the best friend of the opposite gender, listening to what he liked to think were the sounds of her people. Screaming, roaring, shrieking punk rockers and roughnecking, riffing, effing rappers. Without offering him any of her cigarettes, not that he would have accepted, Xerxes knew he was too scared of being caught, she would smoke as if she was inhaling something hallucinogenic, closing her eyes and smiling as if in some hazy bliss, once in a while snapping out of it to explain the music as if it were a foreign tribe of hers whose chants she had to translate for Xerxes. He was glad to belong to all that. He was glad somebody so bad could have it in her heart to love. That word blows, X, she'd always explain, as if accidentally uttering a four-lettered word, even in that regard to a flavor or brand or something that he more than appreciated. Like, he thought. I meant like him. They would clash over only one topic, and that was his guardedness, his boundaries, his ultimate compartmentalization instinct. After all, Xerxes Adam believed he lived in two worlds, and part of that, the dual citizenship agreement, was that he could not allow those worlds to mix. He could not risk having Sam even skim his home life, he had decided early on, and this infuriated Sam, who thought Persians are fucking badass and wanted to eat kebabs and shit and ask his father about politics and how the white devils fuck the brown race. What would they think? Just her manner of speaking would be an attack to them, her style of dressing an outright declaration of war against their god, and her relationship with their son an absolute unpalatable impossibility, because as far as they were concerned, boys and girls were never just friends, and boys were certainly never more than friends with girls like that. On the flip side, he had no way of explaining them to Sam. He could imagine Lala dusting anything Sam touched, as if her roughness of demeanor would certainly transmute into actual germs and scum. He could imagine Darius saying nothing at her over and over until he'd storm off with a slam of the door and refuse to see her ever again and perhaps even call the cops. How could he tell Sam it was okay, that this was just how they were, that coming from a foreign country did that to you, that it was entirely normal in the context of abnormal things? But not only was the opportunity for rejection ripe on both ends, how could he maintain his double agent status in the face of the two worlds colliding like that? He could not be two opposite things at once. How could he bear to reveal to Sam that he was not the badass, or even worthy of being the real badass, the sidekick? That when his father snapped, he cowered. That when his mother looked upset, he had to console her. That he would have to talk about her with them behind her back in Farsi. And that at the same time, how could he have the heart to let his parents see that he related to the lonely misfit kids, that he liked abrasive music, that bad words were comforting to him, that inside him there was a dark, weird soul that only Sam could access? And what if he slipped up? What if he became the apologetic, weak, cowardly Xerxes with Sam by accident, agreeing in soft murmurs until all the conversation in him melted to simply less controversial silence? Or the other way around, what if he became X with his parents, letting a curse or two out, slamming a utensil, kicking a rug, snorting at their outcries? After all the slip-ups happened in school, the Farsi words in his head had sneaked out once or twice the snickers of his peers, and at home he had almost F-worded them, but had just been able to massacre the claws into a coughing fit. It was always hard work, getting the sides of himself straight, he thought, every time he adamantly insisted to Sam that the world simply could not mix. "I've been grounded all week," were his exact words in translating the dilemma to her. "No friends over." "That's what you said last month, X," Sam, never a fool, would snap. "What can I say?" Xerxes would grin, assuming that on some level the excuse always ensured a somewhat win-win outcome in scoring bad kid points with his cohort. "I'm always getting into fucking trouble, Sam, you know?" But Sam, being Sam, eventually had to get her away, and so he compromised by having her come home one evening when he knew they would be away, on one of those nights when Darius was giving Lala driving lessons. The entire hour she was there, Xerxes was nervous, watching everything she touched and rearranging it when she was done, worrying that every car he heard outside was his parents coming home. She admired the Iranian flag posted on one wall, cooed at the alien Arabic script on the book spines, took extensive note of the Persian carpets and old Eastern china on display in the cabinet, but she stopped dead in her tracks for just one object, a framed family photo on a shelf by the hall entrance. For the first time, Xerxes really looked at it too. There they were, Darius, Lala, and Xerxes, age 6 or so, flanked by two additions to their trinity, a giant mouse in gloves and a giant duck with a hat. They were clearly at what was known as the happiest place on earth. Mickey had one hand around Lala, Donald was resting his hand on Darius's shoulder, and young Xerxes was in front, right in the middle. Darius and Lala were grinning in the phony way adults act happy for their kids' sake, as if they were wholly invested in the word cheese. The only being that was smileless in the whole mess was the kid all the smiles were supposedly in honor of, old X himself. Xerxes recognized the look on his younger self's face. It was sheer anxiety. He looked completely out of place, claustrophobic, wanting out, existentially terrorized, as if about to get shot by a gun instead of a camera. He had never noticed his expression before. Sam was clearly noticing it. She tilted her head at the portrait as if trying to take in all the angles. Eventually, she went ahead and held it. Xerxes almost asked her not to, but stopped himself as he watched her. She seemed lost in it, totally absorbed by it, and for the first time, Xerxes saw Sam's face go completely soft. If he didn't know her so well, he would have sworn she was about to cry. She looked from the portrait to the apartment periphery, to him and back the portrait again, as if to put it all in context. She looked sick, sad, as if she felt sorry for it all, as if for once she was understanding that he was an altogether other type of other. "I don't know," she suddenly said. "What?" "Look at you," she said softly, and he thought that she meant the you he used to be, the one in the portrait, but she was looking dead into his eyes. He couldn't be sure. To get in the way of the moment, Xerxes decided to move the tour onward until they got to his room. To try to cleanse the subject, he asked her what she thought of it all. "It's a small place," she said, politely adding, "but I do like it, X." He began fiddling with his books and his music collection, frustrated why he didn't have a single thing she would like when he realized she was staring at him again. He tried to say something she could appreciate. "Got a fucking staring problem, Sammy? Dang." She gave him the finger, and he assumed it was all good. But soon her face went strange again, and she said in a smaller voice than usual, You know what would get that old photo of you out of my head? He was shocked. She was really thinking about it. No idea. She moved closer to him as if about to tell a secret. Well, brace yourself, dude, and don't be fucking weird about it either, okay? Xerxes. She had called him Xerxes. How could that not be weird? She never did that. But before he could consider what the hell she was getting at, one of her hands was clutching the back of his skull as if his cervical spine was in danger of crumbling into dust. Pause. The other hand made its way onto his thigh. Pause. Her face began getting bigger, moving to his. Her eyes began closing. He could feel her breath. He could smell the whole of her, and holy Satan, pow! Her lips ran right into his, a bit hard and for a bit long, and it was very horrifically wet. This was how he remembered thinking of it, maintaining that it had to be an accident, sure that she would never do that, and then worrying that the wetness was somehow his, and now that she was mad or something. But she wasn't. She was in another world, it seemed. She was suddenly gazing out the window, well beyond it, to something he couldn't access. She looked younger, or maybe just her age. Suddenly he saw their teenage for what it was. It looked lost and small and delicate. Fuck, she whispered in her dreamlike state, still staring outside as if for answers. I'm sorry, Xerxes immediately began, the apology seeming like the logical thing, since he simply could not think of what else to say. She shook her head, annoyed. Fuck. That old Sam was immediately back, and she got up, brushing herself off a bit. Your parents just pulled in. Fuck, Xerxes echoed and got up, and for a while it seemed like they were just panicking in place. Before he could process it all, Sam was out the door and down the stairs and around the side behind the parking lot, leaving Xerxes to also run for the door. Instead of the door, his frenzied state caused his limbs to get so careless he tripped over the very rug Sam had examined, tripped right over it and right over the shelf holding the very family portrait Sam had been so taken by. And thus the shelf also panicked, let itself go, and tipped just enough for the frame to fall flat on their faces, every one of them, mouse and duck and atoms. And the fall was fatal. The frame lay cracked into two pieces, barely managing the integrity of the photo it was meant to protect. Outside, he could hear the first of their footsteps on the staircase, just as he sat there sweating bullets over the photo with his critically injured encasement in his hands. He was fucked, and there was no time. It was a bad combination. He quickly set the shelf upright and tried to prop the frame back up on top of it, but it was no use. The frame and two could not stand up as one. Fucked, he thought, as the footsteps felt seconds away from fruition. He was a dead man. He let the frame lie on its back like a pathetic, paralyzed thing just waiting to be noticed. By the time his parents made their way up, he was able to extract himself from the crime scene evidence, which was located quite dangerously adjacent to the entrance. The door was still open from Sam's escape, and Xerxes, numb from all the layers of chaos, was left dumbly standing like a doorman welcoming patrons when his parents finally made it home. "What are you doing here?" Darius immediately said. "I live here," Xerxes snapped stupidly, and Speed walked off to his room. He slammed his door shut and lingered there, holding the lockless knob, listening for clues in the unsafe atmosphere. On the other side, they, of course, talked about him. His mother was trying to say being at the door was no crime, and his father was going on and on about something that was off and how that son of theirs was up to something. Then there were several minutes of very tense silence. He heard something go clink and then clink again, possibly glass, but he was not sure if his paranoia was making it up or if it was real. He felt his eyes sting. He was hot, he was angry, he was frustrated, he was frightened. You did not let the worlds mix. You never let the worlds mix, or else. Hard footsteps. He could hear him breathing on the other side of the door, pausing as if he was listening for his son as well. Hard knock on his door. Xerxes tiptoed away from the door, backing up until he was on his bed, as if he was there all along. "What?" he tried to answer in the most normal voice he could muster. The door opened. As expected, it was Darius. Darius with his angry face, with one hand holding something behind his back. "Anything happened when we were gone?" He towered over his son, who was kneeling in what he hoped was a casual pose atop his bed. Xerxes lied not because he was more afraid of the truth. At that point, he figured he was dead no matter what, but because a lie was quicker, shorter, easier. 2 letters. No. One of Darius's hands clenched. I smelled the rat. His other hand came forward to reveal, of course, the broken frame with its ill-encased photo looking bent up underneath. Xerxes made out their old smiling faces now suddenly looking absurd, mocking, sinister. Only the young Xerxes' expression seemed appropriate, wise beyond his situation, oracular even in its anxiety. Xerxes tried to think, what was the worst part for Darius? That he had broken the frame? That he had broken the particular frame that held a picture of them as a family? A picture of them as a family in happier times? Or was the bad part that he had the sudden audacity to touch things when they were gone? That he stirred in the house? Or perhaps did he see it as a sign of something bigger? Did broken frame equal nervousness, equal illicit activity, equal someone had been inside, equals a girl like that, equals a girl like that who had kissed him? Could it be that the faint smell of Sam's after-school cigarettes were lingering in the house? Had his father perhaps brushed shoulders outside with a tiny black ball of girl that wore the scent of his son's lips? Was it just the look of his lips? Were they somehow marked? He rubbed his mouth absently. Did fathers just know? But what was there to know? That he had lied? Was this all to showcase his dishonesty? That first he had sneaked home a friend, a girl even, then he had lied about it, and then he had tried to pretend that frame killing had never happened when interrogated? Or was it just a bad mood and had found Xerxes' victim ready? Was it just one of those times when it could have been anything and nothing alike? And why did his father towering over him like that make him feel so scared if it was really just a broken picture frame? What the hell had he done, Xerxes wanted to know? Which crime was it? I'll stop that section right there. It ends up rather badly for him to give it away, as badly as he thinks. But so, yeah, the dad and him didn't have a great relationship. But things get kind of worse much later. The second half of the novel kind of focuses on him at quarter life and the dad at midlife. And that also coincides with September 11th in New York, which is where Xerxes ends up moving to. He ends up being one of the unemployed 20-somethings around the time of September 11th. And the one thing the one good thing that came out of that day for him is that's the day that he finds his first girlfriend. So I'm going to read a very short section of how so you guys can see that not all is bad with Xerxes in the world of women. There is a light at the end of the tunnel for a while. Okay, so this is in the East Village in New York. It was the season of paramedic partnerships. It had spread through the city like a most desired virus, singles haunting bars to find flings but companions, the heyday speed dating extravaganzas suddenly morphing into support group-style coupling, fuck buddies being fine but replaced by the finer and fewer who could play monogamy, if not marriage, the desired dating being the dating that verged on holy matrimony, that said constant, that said forever, that said life, not just love. The most desperate and vital and delusional emergency love was in the air. It took some time, however. On the evening of September 11th, it was safe to say this was the last thing on his mind when he first found her on his rooftop, when he finally dared to face the unfiltered skyline. She was sitting in the manner kids call Indian style, a tan, tiny thing in a red calico dress that was stretched modestly over her knees. She was totally still except for the effects of the evening breeze that made her curly dark hair move with an intimidating wildness. He had expected the rooftop 7 or so hours after the event to be flooded with people in tears, holding hands and binoculars, crying, maybe even drinking to a bad, miserable drunkenness. But this female, woman or girl, he couldn't quite tell, was all there it was, and so he cleared his throat with a theatric harshness in hopes that it would make her turn around. It did. 2 outrageously large dark eyes met his. She was almost all eyes. Later, for the life of him, he could not remember her lips. Were they lipsticked? Were they thin? Her nose, big, upturned. The shape of her face, egg, heart. Just her eyes and that unruly tiara of twigs that was her dramatically unkempt hair. Even looking right at her didn't help determine her age. She could be 19, she could be 30, he thought. Most likely lost somewhere in between like him, he hoped. "Hi there," he said awkwardly, realizing they were just the first words he had spoken to a live person that day, the second person at all, period, if you could count the phone call to his mother. Adding immediately when faced with the awkwardness, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just came to look." She turned back to where her view had been directed before, the end of their world, the waterside, and, as if the water's head was steaming with demons, the great tower of dark smoke that bruised the late summer orange skyline like the most egregious metaphor's clotted lyric. Finally, she turned around briefly. "Breathtaking," she said simply, and that was her only word. She turned again to the spectacle, this time with her head tilted downward, and didn't say another word as long as he stood right there with her. Which wasn't long at all, because after 15 minutes or so, the awkwardness really hit him, and he realized that was all their world was to be in the next long while, however long healing really took, whoever knew. Everyone would be awkward, wanting to connect with one another for the sake of the shared milestone, longing to express and overexpress the deep truth within the surface melodrama of how none of them would ever be the same after that, needing to bring it up to anyone and everyone, all their blood brothers and sisters, the citizens of the city, the spectators of its fall, and possibly realizing, just as before, the sad, disappointing truth that nothing had ever really changed, though had it. They were all different and alone and would live and die alone, even if all together, with one another, in a warningless blast, in a crumbling staircase, in a flame, in a fall, alone, awkward, much as they had lived. It killed Xerxes just to think about it. I think I'll stop that section there. They end up going out, and other bad things happen, but some not so bad things happen. Yeah, and I guess that's where I'll end. And if you guys have any questions, hopefully a question or two. Obvious questions are always really fun because it allows you to go to that part of your brain where you have files like, how long did it take you to write it? And you can just whip that out and like a robot, just give the right answer. Yes?
I love that mention about prank calling.
Oh, right. Damn it. You know the Happy Ending reading series in New York? Does anyone know that thing? It's a really good reading series. You guys should actually go to it. It's like every other Wednesday or something at the Happy Ending bar downtown. And they have a whole shtick where they ask you to do like a dare. I don't know what they call it. You have to do some sort of a risk, right? A risk, exactly. With your reading, because I guess it's sort of boring just to read. I don't know. So people generally pick risks that are somehow appropriate to their reading sometimes. So I couldn't come up with a risk that like dealt with my novel really at all. And so I just thought of like, what is a dare to me and what is fun. And I've always loved crank calling. I've been a crank caller for a lot of my life. And so I thought it would be like fun, like sort of connected to the novel if I like crank called Iran. And I realized it was like the reading was at like 7 at night, and it would be like it would be the perfect hour for a crank call. It'd be like 4 a.m. in Iran. So I could actually really harass someone. And so I got like a calling card that day and everything to do with my cell phone. And I even tested it out. I called a number or something right before. I was trying to email these Iranian bloggers for advice on like, who can you crank call? Or like, can you guys give me your numbers or something? They were very disturbed by that. And so I tried to call like an internet company, like they're like Yahoo or whatever. I don't know what it was. I called them an hour before the reading, and I was just like, hi, and I didn't have anything to say, but I just liked that someone answered the phone. It wasn't just that eerie, weird dial tone of foreign numbers. And so I felt pretty confident going into the Happy Ending reading series thing that I was going to crank call Iran, and, had it on, audio and everything. And we could not get a person at all. We tried many numbers, and we could not reach a live person. It's really annoying. But I do, I'd like to crank call a lot. And before my New York Times book review came out, which was a good review, but the New York Times is a very scary thing where they tell you a month in advance that they're going to review your book, but there's just this weird waiting period. I ended up, along with my boyfriend, we ended up crank calling a lot of my hometown friends as just a way to like relieve the tension of this horrible waiting period. And it was very bad. I ended up losing a lot of friends over it. Seriously, they're not my friends anymore. You can ask them, but you can't even ask them because they don't want to acknowledge me. But they all kept saying the same sentence about it. They were like, dude, we're like in our 30s. And like, I didn't make any sense to me. I was like, so why? I'll do it forever. That's what I do. So anyways, I've written an essay about this too. What? Yeah. The best crank call story? Well, the best one is actually the one where you lose all your friends, actually. It's very effective. But the best one is just when I was a very young kid, I used to, again, being like a foreigner, in LA and sort of uncomfortable with that, I was very fascinated with the fact that you could just like call up any country on earth and, talk to a person that was foreign. So I remember for a country report, I did Kenya as a country report. I had a strange fixation with Africa. And I decided again as like the extra credit thing I would call up Kenya, but I just became obsessed with it. I just started I got the country code and I just started calling Kenya all the time. And I used to be so bummed out when they just said hello. I was like, hello, you're supposed to talk to me in like Swahili or something like that. But it was like every time I would just get like a person who'd be like, hello. And so that's not a specific story, but I did have a history with Kenya and various other, and I would also, I did the ghost world thing of egging on, perverts as a kid, trying to keep them on the phone. It happens. Yes.
Literary question.
Yeah. Thank you.
Why a male protagonist and a father-son relationship?
Well, weirdly, I have always written either from the perspective of men or about men. And it's weird to me, actually, too. And I only recently thought of maybe why this could have been. I think it's because I grew up reading the Western canon. And that's a canon that's written by and for and about middle-aged white men. So as a kid, I decided to be a writer very, when I was like 4 or 5. And so I was reading a lot of these books very early on, and I think I was just trying to mimic their tone. So I felt most comfortable with specifically middle-aged men, strangely. So, and it's been a bit of a challenge right now where I'm trying to write about women. It's strangely feels more difficult to me. I think I said in an interview once that men sometimes felt more like blank palettes. They were less loaded. That sounds very insulting to men. But I don't know. I don't know why. I think I'm going to continue writing a lot about men. It's easier somehow. Yes.
One of the obvious questions.
I'm trying to write. It's very difficult to write in New York. I did not write this book in New York. I wrote in Baltimore, actually, where you have less distractions and less reason to leave the house. So I am trying to write a book that actually deals with a lot of female characters, and mostly female cast. So I'm working on that, and I'm also working on a short story collection, and it seems like I'm going to maybe do a collection of personal essays because in the last few months, a lot of different venues have asked for my personal essays, so I've become a personal essay writer. Not a memoirist, not one of the many Iranian female memoir writers. but I guess writer of short memoir, the personal essay. So yeah, I'm trying to. It's very difficult. It's easier to write the first novel, I think, than the second. People are sort of poised at, they want you to fail. It seems to be the feeling is that, your sophomore effort is going to be sophomoric in some way. Yes?
I have a literary question. Like,
Yeah.
let's say you write like a sex scene or something, you're embarrassed, you don't want your parents to
Oh,
read.
yeah.
What do you think about that? Do you do an expedited version?
I used to think about like sending this particular galley to my family that would have like things like exactoed out, I would like a version for the parents. Well, luckily, I don't write any sex scenes. It's a very strange thing to realize about your novel. I think most novels have them, and I somehow, every time interviewers, when I ask a question that was sort of sexy, I would have to just explain to them, there's just nothing in this that's sexy. There's nothing. It's like about fathers and sons and 9/11. It's not sexy. So I have a weird squeamishness about sex scenes that I'm trying to get over for the second novel. But now, the issue about the parents is very legitimate because I think for many years that's what made me very scared to write something that was sort of close to me or had anything to do with my own family. I was always writing like weird short stories that had to do with like math and science and like, I don't know, like sci-fi almost, because it was so different than my... it seemed too scary that if I wrote about a family like my own that was from a suburb in Los Angeles, an Iranian, what will my parents think? And so I was terrified. But the funny thing is, it's like when the book comes out and you're still worried, and then your parents finally read it, they take what they want out of it. It's so funny how humans are like that. You can just give them something and say, like, here you are, this is really scary, this is pretty much all about you, and they will just like not see that. And they'll instead be bedazzled by peripheral issues like, oh, yeah, you got interviewed by this magazine, or, oh, I heard you on the radio, or that's so cool. So they just, got sort of into the sideshow, and I very much avoided the very awkward conversation of like, so what about some of it, the stuff in here that is sort of close to us? I just avoid things. That's the best. Avoid conversations. Run. Yeah.
So following on from that, how much is actually growing up?
How much of it is actually like me growing up? Yeah, I mean, the setting is definitely, I was very open about the setting. Pasadena is my hometown, South Pasadena, and it's literally the apartment building that my parents still live in and that I grew up in, and to the point where I had the real address in there until the final copy edits. I don't know why. I think I was mad at my parents or something like that, and I was like, haha, I'll just leave the real address there, and your real phone number was even in there. It was crazy. And then my editor realized when she sent me galleys when I was working on edits in my home that it was the same address in the novel, and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know. It's a bad idea. So I just did a find and replace all and changed it vaguely. So there are things that are very true. I was very inspired by the crappy suburban growing up period. So I wanted to really keep that real. And but it's about a father and son. So a lot of people think it's like about my brother, because I do have a younger brother who now lives in New York, who's the exact same age as the protagonist, who, in a weird, like life, like imitating art moment, he ended up going out with a girl that resembles exactly the girl that I just described, his girlfriend. I mean, and there's very specific things about her, like she's half Iranian, and he ended up dating a woman that's half Iranian. It's very strange. No, there are things that are not so real, but some of the sentiment, I think often your first book is your most biographical. That tends to be the rule with a lot of the debut novels. There are elements. The thing that's the most real is that the sort of awkwardness and pain of growing up as an immigrant in an area that wasn't a diaspora hotspot. I was not in Tehran, for instance. And so I felt a little bit freakish. So, yeah. Yes?
I haven't read this book yet, but a lot of books where they take place sort of in a specific culture, maybe not the culture of the reader, the author has to try to find line between saying things that are foreign that the character would take for granted, but the reader might not understand. So you sort of have to maybe explain them, but that takes away the concept of being understood.
Yeah.
How do you sort of balance that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is very difficult because you don't want to, you're not writing nonfiction and you don't want to have many paragraphs of just exposition to explain the cultural references. I just sort of assumed, had confidence in the intelligence of readers, so there's some Farsi insults or Farsi phrases, just thrown in there sometimes. I don't explain it. And some I do briefly. It is very hard. You just have to just constantly go back to the story and just give enough information to carry the story, I think. Because I think sometimes I do read books that are sort of, I think sometimes writers get so lost in the research. Research is such a more tempting fix, it's more immediate. You just toss it, cut and paste, and whatever, spend a few months procrastinating and reading a million books and then just clutter the writing with that stuff where I think it's really just about the human stuff, the more universal truths in the book that you have to let carry the plot and the themes. So I try not to think of that too much because I don't want I don't like the writing to be weighed down with that stuff. I'm most interested in the sentences itself themselves and language. So yeah. Yes. My favorite writers are. I love David Foster Wallace. Is probably my biggest favorite writer of contemporary writer. I like, I'm inspired by a lot of poets, weirdly, too. I like James Wright and Philip Larkin and Jared Manley Hopkins, a big obsession with for a while. And then I like a lot of the 19th century Europeans, too. Probably the same ones, most people, the Brontes, Dostoevsky, all the great novels. So I'm sort of torn between the very traditional canon of the 19th century and then the sort of modern, 20th century experimentalists and, dare I say it, metafiction writers. I like David Foster Wallace, but like the Pynchons, the DeLillos, all that stuff is really exciting to me. It's writing that's really like art-driven interests me a lot. Yeah.
Is there one more question?
What's on your nightstand?
I just literally, because I've been sick for like 2 weeks, I just finished a book that I thought was amazing, and it was literally like one of those experiences where like I couldn't put the book down. I was in a feverish frenzy to like finish this book, and it was Junot Diaz's Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. I highly recommend it. He was an author at Google, I think at Mountain View, and I excitedly watched his talk. But it's a wonderful book, and it's sort of what you're talking about. The cultural references there are very innovatively woven in with not too much exposition, and it's experimental, but also incredibly fun and just a great story. So I recommend it highly.
Well, thank you for
Thank you.
reading at Google with the use of the word fuck the most often.
Oh God, sorry.
Apologies to HR.
Hope
There may
not,
be sex scenes,
yeah.
but, so
A lot of bad language. Thank you.